our approach of Asian ministry. Now on, when we go out, we are kind of very simple. How to love people in the church, how to love people in your community is the more focus on our ministry. Well, I think this is great. Just pray for that Asian people, because every church is in hard time these days. The young people are declining. Well, this is natural. Actually, don't worry about declining the people. Actually, before I come into young adult ministry, my focus on elderly ministry. Right now, this is like the baby boomer generation going into the retirement. Their population is this big, and your children only have this much population. Church is kind of getting smaller, declining naturally. This is the basic happen. But the thing is, quality of the ministry is more important, and we have to focus that the quality, so we can bring young people to our church. Not in Pentecostal church, not in independent church, or like Oasis, or when you name it, when you go there, whole bunch of young people there, worshiping different style. Why don't we do that in your church?
We've been trying so hard to break
we have to concern about this. This is one kind of we are talking about long-time shows, Sunny Kang, and this is Asian ministry. Whenever we have a meeting, so whatever you have a question or something like have an idea or the approaches, please let us know.
I have a question
Sure.
on this line. Is this basically for established churches? Established churches? Okay, here's a question. For established churches here in the PC, USA system, say, they tend to be more traditional, whatever. They want to develop a young adult youth ministry. Okay, what do people think of the approach that they partner with parachurch groups that are doing this really well? Like Young Life, partnership with a Young Life, or InterVarsity.
That's very important.
I mean, what do people think about that approach?
We have a number of different models of that. The one that I mentioned with the impacting hearts and emerging light, they now have partnered with Young Life, and so that ministry has. The only thing that I would always caution is that often the only reason there are problems is because there's unclear mission. It's what is the purpose? If it's because the Young Life and others do not want to be a church and they can't give up certain control, they're working with parachurch organizations, and their, for example, their theological stance, sometimes will put you into a church in difficulties. And because those are larger national groups, often they end up being the ones dictating what happens in the ministry, and they don't. You just got to be careful who you partner with.
Exactly.
Well, the models that I have helped to develop a lot is a church exists, and some of its programs actually are done in partnership. Different parts, not entirety of the church, but part of its program is done in partnership with nonprofits, but not religious nonprofits. That have the built as a social concerns as the church wants to do missions. That we have seen and usually found to have a far better potentials and better relationships. So like when I was in Duluth, Minnesota.
Concern right there, because you remove it then, it's just becoming a profit.
Well, no, it's not that. It's that many of these nonprofits, I work with Los Angeles County. I'm on a commission with children and families. And right now, LA County in the last 5 years changed the wording that says 25% of all of its grant money can go to churches. They just gave out their first grant money to churches directly. It was only eligible for churches. And the idea was to recruit foster families from within the churches. So these nonprofits can partner with churches very easily, but as long as you can figure out what ministry that you are willing to partner with them in the community, and often the churches can become the lead agents and fiscal agent. And so when I was in Duluth, we used to run $2 million through my church as I was the lead agent. Then we were paid extra $40,000 a year for the administration. So that paid for my secretary, that paid for my, my treasurer. And so there are a number of different ways the church can do it, as long as you know exactly what you're after.
Yeah, I'm talking more about young adult and youth development
Ministry development for the church. So this would be like just young adult and youth. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Oftentimes with InterVarsity and campus like groups like Young Life or even Campus Crusade, they're not focused on ethnicities, right?
Well, they do have national ministries.
They have national ministries. Within that, they're not saying, oh, we want to do that. I'm not so sure. Do they have segments of that that says Young Life, Asian American groups? Do they? Or InterVarsity Young Life, or InterVarsity Asian Americans, or Campus Crusade? Because basically, it's it's like they don't. So in our group here, we're talking Asian American churches, right? We're talking Asian American churches here, ethnic groups.
But I would rather raise a bigger question, however, and that is, if young people are English speaking,
Yes.
why do they need to be in an Asian American ministry separate from everybody else?
And that's a good question. Yeah, and that's a good question. Maybe that could work then because they don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's nothing needs to be done further.
Because if his church
Right.
has
They
English
don't-
ministry, and you have an African American that wants to come to your church, would you say, no, you cannot come because you're not Vietnamese or you're not Asian? You would welcome him, right? So therefore, then the question of why couldn't Asian American congregations be the sources of place where they value ethnicity and value cultural heritage and expressions of faith in a various different ways, so that it could be the very entity that would allow people from all backgrounds to come, rather than saying we only uphold certain theological positions. In the past, the difficulty of the InterVarsity and Campus Crusade for Christ and others is that they are not reformed in theology, and all their teachings have been very critical of churches, and so that's why no denomination actually have a partnership relationship with those. Well, no, currently, and ones that used to have all terminated them.
That's all right.
Yeah, in '70s they had a lot more partnerships when I was in college, and they had a lot more, but they all disappeared because those entities, InterVarsity, Campus Crusade for Christ, Navigators, have decided that they are not going to partner with churches because it is contrary to they chose not to endorse any churches or any denomination of any kind. And so therefore, that's why they remain just completely independent and not accountable to any churches.
The one that you mentioned that is already doing that?
That would be exception.
The Young Life
Yeah.
Young Life approach, because where we set up Impacting Hearts Emerging Light is set up as an independent nonprofit, one for educational, charitable, and other one set up as a religious. But it was independent, and therefore that's how.
I see.
So they will do that, but they will not partner with denominations in particular.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how they want to work together to set this up. Yeah, so
Right.
it's possible. Okay.
Yeah,
Because, my home church actually does that right now, but I don't know how they set that up. But so that to me was just really interesting. I never thought of it before.
Yeah, when I started youth ministry at the church I was at, we partnered with Young Life, and what I did was took the person who was half-time staff at Young Life and made him full-time between Young Life and my church.
Yeah, that's right.
So we had that, and the advantage was their $2 million insurance could be carried over onto us, and all of their programming became available to us. But there is a lot of tricky things that you have to be able to manage. and your church leadership has to be very aware of the limitations of the partnership. So as people know what they're doing, and as long as there's clear understanding that, and most often those partnerships are best if they last for a few years rather than a permanent relationship. Yeah, and
Did you say it was a Korean church before that did this?
no, there was a South Bay Presbyterian Church in Torrance. That's where when I was a pastor.
Oh, the one that set this, okay.
Yeah, we set that up, and then our problem became with the staff person itself, and dishonesty that was there. Both sides decided to terminate that.
No, okay, after that.
It was not because of the structure or the organizations.
After that terminated,
Was a young adult youth ministry flourish after it, at that church?
Yeah, because on top of that person, we had our own. I had the second person that we were training.
yeah, okay.
So I hired a college student who was a freshman in college to be the youth ministry leader, and I watched over and trained him. He's now finished seminary, and he's now ready for ordination. He is of Chinese American origin. He has a wide range of internship experiences in non-Asian churches as well. Has years of experience in preaching to great discipler of young people. Has great understanding of ministry. That's why I asked if you're open to somebody who's not Vietnamese, because he's ready to receive a call. And but I had to get involved as well. And the youth ministry and the size and so on never really changed, and we continued on in the same way, because the way the program was built, it was not built on the leader, but program was built to building the community among the young people, so that they kept going, no matter who the leader was. And because young people ministry is not about structure, but it is about relationships. So if we really handle the relationship, that's what they want.
The tent is to creating that relationship into the ministry. So don't, you're talking about more spiritual or something like CCC or Campus Crusade, and let's, for young people ministry, let's open the door for them first, inviting people.
Yes, yes, of course.
For the college ministry partnership with campus ministry can work, because campus ministries their goal is only to work with students when they're during their college years. And after that, they don't know how to help disciple people to be in churches. Because university, who did more emphasis on churches, did their research in 1982, 83, they did research on what happened to their executive team leaders, who were the campus leaders, 10 years that they left the college. And they found out that 99% of them were not even attending churches, not even in leadership. They weren't even in churches. This is out of 100 of their leaders. So campus ministries sometimes can do more harm to church than help. The only thing that hindered the South Bay was that some of the young people from the church got involved in campus ministries, and they came back only teaching certain theological things and what they experienced in college, and they wanted to put it in the high school without realizing the developmental differences. And they ended up driving a lot of the young people away, and only time we could grow was we had to get rid of these young people from the church leadership, but which were some of the old founding members' children. And I had to get them out of the way in order for church to grow. But then what happened was, you have to be aware, we went from 2 kids to 60 kids in youth ministry in 1 year. 40 of them had never been in church before. 40 of these kids were brand new, never been exposed to church, and we are witness to them. And only reason we could do that was because we had to get rid of traditional church-trained church youth out of the way, because they're wanting just a Bible study, they're just wanting things answered in a certain way. So if your youth ministries intend to build deep spiritual young people in a certain formation, then you have to certain leadership and certain style, certain programming. If you want to do outreach and bring in new unbelievers and are willing to invest in them, then it has to be in a very different format. Different relationship is needed. Right, right, right. And at that point, then, in a relationship with like in a varsity or campus crusade for Christ would not be helpful.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like Young Life is more workable.
Well, that, yes and no, yeah. Again, that all depends on who the local leader is. Yeah.
And the relationship the church has built with them.
Also, the life of young adults is very different from the rest.
Yeah.
Like today,